A lot of people feel a strange pressure this time of year. The calendar flips, and suddenly it feels like you're supposed to be someone new, clear, motivated, resolved, and ready. Even if the weeks leading up to it were heavy, exhausting, or emotionally complicated. If you're not feeling energized or inspired right now, there's nothing wrong with you. There's a reason this moment can feel unsettling instead of exciting. Because starting over is often treated like a requirement when in reality, it's rarely what we actually need. We've been taught that the new year is a clean slate, that whatever didn't work before can be erased with the right intention, the right plan, or the right mindset. And for some people, that framing feels hopeful. But for many others, especially those who are thoughtful, responsible, and self aware, it feels like pressure. Pressure to resolve things that are still unfolding. Pressure to be done with chapters that aren't finished yet. Pressure to declare clarity before it's actually there. I want to offer a different perspective. You don't need a new year to start over because most meaningful change doesn't happen through resets. It happens through continuity, through honesty, through staying with what's true long enough for it to shift. Often the urge to start fresh isn't about growth. It's about discomfort. It's about wanting distance from what feels unresolved, confusing, or emotionally heavy. Starting over can feel cleaner than staying present with uncertainty, but growth rarely asks us to become someone new overnight. More often, it asks us to stop abandoning ourselves in subtle ways. I've had years where January arrived and I felt clear and ready, and I've had years where it arrived and I felt tired, reflective, and inward. In those quieter years, I used to think I was doing something wrong, like I was missing the moment. What I've learned is that those were often the years when something important was actually integrating, when my system needed less direction and more space. Not every season is for action. Some are for digestion. One of the reasons New Year pressure can feel so intense is because it bypasses the body. It assumes that motivation is a switch you can flip instead of a signal that emerges when conditions are right. When you force a fresh start before you're ready, what you're often doing is overriding information. You're telling yourself that clarity should come from the calendar instead of from listening. And that rarely leads to alignment. Here's something worth considering. Many people don't actually want to start over, they want relief. They want permission to stop carrying what's been heavy. They want to feel oriented again. Starting over becomes the language we use when we don't yet have access to clarity. But clarity doesn't come from declaring intentions. It comes from noticing patterns. It comes from paying attention to what drained you this year, what sustained you, and what you kept tolerating long after it stopped feeling right. That kind of clarity can't be rushed. If you're entering this new year without a plan, without goals, without a word or a vision, that doesn't mean you're behind. It may mean you're actually listening. There are quieter ways people begin again that don't get talked about much. Sometimes beginning again looks like telling you the truth to yourself about what no longer fits without doing anything about it yet. Sometimes it looks like resting instead of reinventing. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to make promises you don't yet believe. These aren't signs of avoidance, they're signs of self-trust. We live in a culture that treats momentum as virtue, but momentum without alignment often leads to repetition. You don't need more force, you need more honesty. One of the most helpful questions you can carry into a new year isn't, what do I want to achieve? It's, what do I no longer want to carry? Not as a goal, as an observation. Pay attention to where you feel relief when you imagine letting something go. Pay attention to where your body softens. That information is far more useful than any resolution. Another important thing to name is this. Growth doesn't always look forward-facing. Sometimes it looks like staying with yourself through ambiguity instead of rushing towards answers. If you've outgrown an old version of your life, there's often a space in between. You're no longer who you were, but not yet sure who you're becoming. That space can feel uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly generative. Trying to start over too quickly can pull you out of that space before it's done teaching you. So if you find yourself moving slowly into this year, let that be okay. If you feel reflective instead of energized, let that be okay. If you don't know what this year is about yet, let that be okay. You're allowed to enter a new year without reinventing yourself. You're allowed to carry questions forward. You're allowed to let direction emerge over time. Starting over is optional. Staying connected to yourself is not. If you want to mark this moment in any way, you might simply ask yourself this: what would it look like to move into this year with a little less pressure and a little more presence? You don't need answers right now. You don't need a plan. You don't need to decide who this year will require you to be. You can step into it as you are, and that's more than enough. If this reflection resonated, you don't need to do anything with it today. You can let it sit. You can come back to it later. And if you want more conversations like this about clarity, transitions, and living with honesty, you can explore more of my work or join me on Substack. The link is below. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.